at that convention with their endorsements for former President Donald Trump, with Sarah Huckabee Sanders speaking, serving while his press secretary. So she came back to Arkansas, obviously, and then got back to the national stage in prime time, speaking on his behalf. Before we get into that, I'd like to play a clip because she touted some legislative achievements during her speech. So we just want to hear part of that before we talk about it.
For the last 4 years, Republican governors have been leading that fight and doing what Joe Biden refuses to do. We've deployed the National Guard to the border. We've cracked down on crime and drugs. We cut taxes to give hardworking Americans a break from Bidenflation. And we empowered parents with universal school choice across the country. Donald Trump was the very first president in my lifetime to take a hard line against China, and I'm proud to be the first and only governor in the country to kick communist China off our farmland and out of my state. President Trump is a leader, and he's the leader our country needs. And if ever there was a doubt, earlier this week, we saw just how tough, resilient, courageous, and daring this man is, and we can't get him back in the White House fast enough.
All right, so hearing that and also knowing that Senator Tom Cotton speaking as well in prime time, he mostly focused on immigration, something that he is very passionate about. What were your thoughts first, Josie, on just two Arkansans, two Arkansas politicians, and being in that primetime spotlight at the Republican National Convention since the last time it happened, I believe, was 2016 with former Governor Asa Hutchinson and then Attorney General Leslie Rutledge?
Yeah, this is a pretty big deal, and there was a lot of whispering that Sarah Huckabee Sanders maybe was considered for VP, so they seem to still have a pretty good relationship. And she hit on a lot of themes in that speech that Trump is really passionate about, and the biggest one for me is immigration. She also told, we didn't see this in the clip, but she told a lot of really lovely stories about him. The story that she's told several times about the MSNBC reporters, she felt like they were really mean to her in the time that Trump kind of built her up during that situation. A time where her and her son were in the White House together, and there was this like hug moment that she had with and the president was there, and so she had it was a very nostalgic speech for her, and I think she really wanted to hone in on this fact that she was a mother too. She brought that up a lot.
Tess, what would you think?
Well, there was a little bit of buzz that both Sanders and Cotton were possibly being considered for VP, and we didn't know for sure that who the actual VP pick was until a few days ago. They both talked a lot about the border. They really hit on a lot of talking points you hear a lot from elected Republicans on both the state and the national level. And as you heard at the very beginning of that clip, she kind of painted Republican leaders as kind of warriors for conservative causes. And you see a lot of, for example, she didn't say this, but you see a lot of Republican attorneys general filing lawsuits against decisions that the Biden administration has made over the last 4 years. And Attorney General Tim Griffin has frequently been one of them. So, and you heard her kind of allude to the assassination attempt as well, trying to paint Republicans as this party that's being attacked and trying to fight back.
One of the things, too, that not just with those two, with our elected leaders here, with Senator Cotton and Governor Sanders, but it did seem like there were times where there were messages that were more focused on policy than attacking the other side. There were some quips in between, you know, obviously we heard a couple there, but it did feel like maybe after the assassination attempt and the calls for unity nationally at that point did shift a little bit of the narrative to more focused on policy. That's what Governor Sanders mostly talked about in that clip, right, Josie?
Yeah, and she was really proud of Arkansas Learns. She talked about school choice in that speech, and she also talked about laws that she's tried to pass about China and Chinese businesses in Arkansas, and these are things that conservatives have been very excited about lately.
I want to turn now to another topic. Arkansas Attorney General Tim Griffin going to be defending Secretary of State in this lawsuit coming up. He spoke with Arkansas PBS this week talking about the abortion amendment lawsuit that was just filed this past week. Well, Attorney General Griffin said that he was limited in discussing the pending litigation, but it was his blunt assessment that the requirements were not met when the signatures were turned in last week. Let's take a listen.
Those requirements relate to ensuring that the individuals who are hired to collect signatures are properly trained, etc. And the requirements in the law are very clear, and other groups followed them. And in this case, the group at issue with regard to the abortion matter did not follow the law. And we will obviously be dealing with that in detail in court. But I think the Secretary of State did the right thing legally, and we are going to be enthusiastically defending them.
Once again, this is a group backing a proposed abortion amendment that was rejected by the Secretary of State's office, filed this past week. It's challenging a number of factors cited by the state, saying the requirements weren't met to be on that November ballot. You just heard the Attorney General talking there about he'll be defending the Secretary of State. Josie, let's start with you. I know you both have followed this story very closely. This group has been working for a long time to collect signatures. What's the latest? And if you can, give the folks at home just an idea of what this challenge is all about.
So I think we're all a little confused here. The Arkansans for Limited Government, and they're the abortion advocacy group, they are pretty adamant they haven't done anything wrong. And I think we can all agree that there's pretty strict rules about ballot signatures and ballot amendments and what documents you have to turn in. We all agree that there was 2 documents they had to turn in. One was a list of paid canvassers. Now, Arkansans for Limited Government in the lawsuit says 17 times they turned in a list of paid canvassers, including on the day things were due, which was July 5th, and that there was somebody who notarized it. And you can see on the document it was notarized on July 5th. The second document was a list of, was evidence that those paid canvassers had signed, or had seen the handbook. And there's kind of some debate about when that was turned in. Was it turned in too early? And that's one of Tim Griffin's big arguments. That document was turned in too early. It was notarized on the 5th, which was the day that things were due. And the law isn't really clear about exactly what the due date is. So there's a lot of confusion about whether or not they turned in the right documents. But at the end of the day, like the timer's counting down. Like we're almost at the end of time where the Secretary of State would have to count the signatures. And
they're still collecting signatures, correct, Tess?
Yeah, they have been. And they have also appealed to the Supreme Court to try to get them to overrule Secretary Thurston's rejection of the amendment. So they got more than they needed, more signatures. You needed at least 90,000 and some change. They got over 101,000. And they say in their legal documents that's actually a conservative count. It might even be higher. But the Secretary of State's office hasn't counted the signatures. And there are stipulations in state law that say here's a list of reasons why the Secretary of State can reject an amendment and not count the signatures. And the legal complaint says, well, none of those reasons are in Secretary Thurston's listed reason for why he's rejecting this one and not counting the signatures at all. He said that there were about 14,000 signatures that were collected by paid canvassers. The rest were collected by unpaid volunteers. And without that 14,000-ish, they would fall below that 90,000 threshold. And Secretary Thurston said basically, well, you didn't hit 90,000, then we're not going to count. And Arkansans for Limited Government is saying, no, you have to count anyway. So that's one of the big issues of debate. Is the Secretary required to be counting the signatures right now, even if the total ends up not being what they hope it will be? And yeah, that's kind of the heart and soul of the confusion that is going on here.
Well, we appreciate you breaking that down, and thank you for your time this past week. KUAR's Josie Lenora and Arkansas Advocates Tess Bourbon, we appreciate your time. Look forward to seeing you back in studio for another Reporters Roundtable. That's all we have for Arkansas Week. We'll see you next time.